Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to today's webinar, Pot of Forecast Updates, Recovery Paths for Asia. Again, we have some great speakers with us here today, so I'm very happy you all can join us. But before we begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Paul Brangan. I am the Director of Communications and External Affairs at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I will be your host for today. As I said, we have a great lineup of speakers today. Unfortunately, there is a slight change as one of our speakers from Euromonitor is unable to join us today due to some personal emergency. So we are short one presentation, but we will be able to share presentation with all the attendees after the event. So besides that note, let me give you some other quick notes about how to use Zoom, if for those of you who may be unfamiliar. As you'll see at the bottom of your browser, there are two functions, a chat function and a Q&A. For the chat, feel free to say hello, where you're from, any comments you might have about the presentations. However, if you have any questions for our speakers, please submit them using the Q&A function as shown on your screen. Please do not submit any questions using the chat function, as it's a little bit distracting for us to go back from chat to Q&A to look at the various questions that might be coming in. And as always, please do make sure to keep your questions and the chats cordial and professional. And so, as I said, these are our speakers that will be speaking with, they'll be joining us today. As I said, Caroline is unable to join us. So we'll have 4 presentations, and then that will be followed by a panel discussion and Q&A. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first presenter. He's the Associate Dean and Mr. and Miss Chan Chak Fu Professor in International Tourism in the School of Hotel and Tourism Management at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Haiyan Song. Professor Song, hello.
Hi, thank you, Paul, for the intro. Good afternoon from Hong Kong. Let me share the screen first. So you see the screen okay?
You need to swap displays?
Okay, so we need to swap again. How about now?
Nope, I think it's the same problem we had last time.
Oh, right. So actually I swapped the screen, but seems it's not working. Now it's not okay?
No, it's not.
All right.
Professor Dr. Anu, would you want to take over and present the slides for Professor Song, please?
Okay, I will stop sharing because otherwise.
I'll share from my side. Hopefully it will work. Does it work?
Yeah, we can see the screen, but it's white. There's no content.
About now?
Nope, I don't see it.
I think probably it's a Zoom problem. I remember last time was okay, but
or maybe, Professor, you can just go through the slides without the presentation mode. Is that okay?
Right. Okay.
So I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Let me share. So can you see the slides now?
Nope, there's nothing sharing.
Nothing shared, right? Okay, let me try it again. So apology for this delay. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, they look good. They look perfect.
Look good now, right? Okay, yes. Now what happened? All right, sorry about that. So actually, this is the second update of the Asia Pacific visitor forecast since it first published in January 2021. So in this, okay, somehow it is not. Although it is shared from your side, but I cannot actually go to the next slides. So that's. So you cannot see the next slides, right? Oh. So, can you see anything?
I think
Hello?
now it works.
Right. Okay. So yeah, basically, this is a second update since January 2001. Actually, in July 2021, we had update, but since then we had the data up to the first quarter of 2021. So we updated the forecast and make some adjustment. So this adjustment is made to three scenarios: medium, a mild, medium, and a severe scenarios. Depend on the impact, the situation of the impact of COVID-19. So before I present the methodology that we used in the update, we just refresh your memory in terms of forecasting process, which we presented last couple of times. Basically, all forecasts were produced based on econometric models, which we constructed and estimated based on the factors that may influence the demand for tourism. And then since we developed three different scenarios, based on the COVID situation and also confirmed cases in different source market and destinations, we make automatic adjustment. Basically, it is adjustment made to the initial baseline forecast in terms of the recovery path. But then some of the forecasts will need further adjusted. So we carry out a scenario adjustment based on the information that made available to us. I will explain what those informations include. So then we make a scenario adjustment to the three scenarios that we developed based on the most recent available information. And this adjustment is made based on a panel of experts. So this expert, based on their understanding of the COVID situation in different source market and destinations, and made adjustment. Once it converged, we agree. The panel agreed the adjustment. Then it is final. So in terms of a scenario development, basically. We based on the information on the following COVID-19 situations. First, some countries adopted zero case strategy, i.e. they just do not allow any international travel to or from those countries and regions. So the control is very tight. So some countries actually has this zero case strategy, especially China. And also we look at the border closing in terms of the extent of the border close, and also the visa restrictions for international tourism into the region. And also we look at the quarantine requirement on arrival, because the different countries and destinations have different quarantine requirement. Actually, for Hong Kong, for example, actually the requirement changed from time to time drastically based on what's going on in terms of the COVID cases. And also we look at the vaccination coverage and also the hesitation of a certain population in terms of being vaccinated. And also we look at the supply situation of the vaccination in developing countries. So those are the information that we considered when we make the scenario adjustment. In terms of the scenario development, actually, this was presented last time. I repeat it again. Basically, on all these scenarios was developed based on first previous research in terms of the pandemic impact on tourism. Although there's not many pandemic as big as this one, but still they provide useful information in terms of how they impacted the demand and how the demand recover after the pandemic goes away. But the scale of the impact, of course, is different at this time. And we also look at the impact assessment of COVID-19 on the national economies or tourism by such organizations as Oxford Economics, Euromonitor International, and UNWTO, because all these organizations produce certain type of forecast, especially scenario forecasts on the economic activity. So we look at their forecasts and the way they make the scenario forecast. So we actually take these forecasts as a reference when we make our adjustment to our original baseline forecast. And also we look at the information on travel restrictions, vaccination coverage, and also destination source countries' COVID situation, and also policies. So these are the information that being considered in developing those scenarios. And in terms of update, actually, we adopted two-stage mixed method to adjust our forecast produced by the statistical models. The first stage is quantitative, we call it a quantitative update, considering actual arrival data up to the first quarter of 2021. Remember, last time in July, when we made adjustment, the data for the first quarter of 2021 was not available. So that adjustment was based on the data up to the end of 2020. But now, since the data for 2021 quarter one is available, so we make the adjustment to the statistical forecast, and we made some upward and downward adjustment. Later, I will present which countries or regions being adjusted upward or downward. The second stage is to using a Delphi approach or a panel expert to adjust the forecast that produced in the first stage quantitative update, right? So this Delphi approach include two round back-to-back adjustment by the expert until the adjustment converge to agree the level. Okay, these are the process who made the adjustment. In terms of which country or destinations have been adjusted, this is a list of the countries and destinations being substantially adjusted since the second update in July 2021, right? So of course, China, we made a downward adjustment. That was because of the Delta outbreak in August 2021, and also China's continuous policy of zero case strategy. So this actually, we continue to make downward adjustment. Actually, the first time we made downward adjustment. Hong Kong, of course, we also made a downward adjustment because there was some outbreak in Hong Kong, but most importantly, Hong Kong relies China as a main source market. So there's actually outbreak in China. So the border of Hong Kong continue to be closed. So we'll make additional adjustment for Hong Kong, Macau as well, and Korea, Bhutan, Laos, Singapore, and Vietnam. So actually Singapore is very interesting. So although there's supposed to be some travel bubbles, but the bubble burst and Singapore is now fully open. But Hong Kong actually still closed to most of the destinations. You have to do at least 21-day quarantine from most of our main source market. Okay, so now I'm going to present the adjustment that we made. There are two diagrams you can see on the screen. The one on the left is the first adjustment, the first update we made in July 2021. And the one on the right-hand side is this update. So you can see for Americas, the adjustment is very minimal. It's only 1% upward adjustment in the severe cases. So the diagram, what the diagram shows is that the recovery path in three different scenarios: mild, medium, and severe. And the figures at the bottom in percentage represent the percentage recovery as compared with pre-COVID-19 data, 2019. So if it's 96%, which means by end of 2023, will be 96% recovered from the pre-COVID-19 level. And 77 means 77% recovered, and 55% of the pre-COVID-19 level in the severe cases scenario. For the Northeast Asia, we also made some adjustment, downward adjustment, as you can see in the first update in July 2021, the figure was adjusted downward for all three scenarios. So you can see by the end of 2023, the recovery instead of 99% now is 94%. In the mild scenario, and 72% instead of 79% in the medium scenario, and 47% in the severe scenario. There's some adjustment that we call the substantial adjustment, but you can see they are still in a relatively small range. It's not huge in terms of percentage adjusted. For South Asia, also quite significant downward adjustment actually is around 13.7% downward adjustment. If you look at the figure on the right-hand side, by 2023, in the mild scenario, it will only recover to 87% of the pre-COVID level. 60% in the medium scenario and 37% in the severe scenario. You can see this time is much lower than the first adjustment in July 2021. For Southeast Asia, there are also some downward adjustment, but relatively mild compared with the previous destination. In our July adjustment, we thought the recovery will be 100% in the mild scenario by the end of 2027. Now it's become only 96%. So the other two scenarios were also downward adjusted. For West Asia, there was also around 6 to 7% downward adjustment. So you can see most of the sub-regions has been downward adjusted. For Pacific, actually there was some adjustment, but it's very small. It's only 1 to 2%. So which means, in this region, our original forecast still actually stand. There's a very small adjustment. Now I'm going to present a few countries in terms of the scenario forecast in this round. For China, as you can see, we mentioned earlier, so there was quite a big downward adjustment by 2023 in our latest forecast. In the mild scenario, by 2023, there were only 83% recovered as compared with pre-COVID-19. And this level is reasonable in our view. And in the mild scenario, we also made a relevant adjustment. The level of adjustment is similar to the mild scenario. In terms of Hong Kong, as you can see, Hong Kong seems in the mild scenario, there was not much adjustment. We're still quite optimistic in terms of the recovery. But in the medium and severe scenario, there was some downward adjustment because there are uncertainties, because China seems Hong Kong is very much making their policies based on the mainland, right? So if the mainland is open, then Hong Kong will immediately benefit. So there's a lot of uncertainty in Hong Kong. Therefore, there's some discrepancies between the mild, medium, and severe scenario. But for Thailand, there was some downward adjustment, but not very much. It's only 1% downward adjustment in the mild scenario. So our original forecast is still quite accurate. USA actually is also some downward adjustment in the mild scenario, but in the other and also severe scenario and medium scenario seems the same. So some adjustment, but not a lot. Okay, so these are some of the brief descriptions of our latest update of the visitor forecast for the whole region. We only I only presented the sub-region level adjustment together with a few countries adjustment as illustration. But if you want to find out more about the latest forecast or update, you need to get access to PATA visitor forecast latest update to obtain the detailed forecast or scenario forecast for each of the countries or regions within Asia Pacific. But overall, in terms of the total visitor arrival in Asia Pacific will recover to 667 million, around 94% of the pre-COVID level, 518 million and 339 million in medium and also a severe scenario by the end of 2023. So in the severe scenario, as you can see, so we predict by the end of 2023 will only recover up to 48.3%. So that's quite severe. So that's something we have to watch out based on the evolving information that provided to us. And also the Pacific will have the highest recovery rate in the mild and medium scenarios over the forecast period. Mild 102%, and also medium 78%. And also America will have the highest recovery rate, 54% in the severe scenario. So that's a little bit better than overall in the region's overall recovery. In terms of South Asia, we have the lowest recovery in all scenarios. These are the percentage 86, 60, and 36% in different scenarios. And of course, those forecasts will be further updated to capture the latest impact for COVID-19 on international travel within the region. So we were actually in the process of preparing next year's forecast. So please do stay tuned, and the next year's forecast will be issued in January 2022. So by that time, I'm sure there will be additional adjustment to those scenario forecasts. Thank you very much. That's me. If you have any questions, especially technical questions, my colleague, Dr. Anyu Liu from University of Surrey is standby to answer your technical questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Song. He will be joining us later for the discussion and Q&A. So as he said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And as Professor Song noted, we'll be releasing our updated forecast in just a few weeks. So please do keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much, Professor Song. And let's get to the next presenter. So just a reminder, feel free to drop any questions you have into the Q&A, or feel free to use the chat if you have any comments about what you're seeing today. So with that, we've come to our next presentation, and we are joined today by the CEO of TCI Research, Mr. Olivier Henry Biabald, and he'll be looking at sentiment analysis. So with that, over to you, Olivier.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's really great again to be part of this PATA forecast family session. So for another exciting session on sharing data to look a bit about the future. And there is actually one of the key components of forecasting is about social sentiment aspects. So thanks again, Liz. Thanks, Paul, for this opportunity to contribute to that forecast. I think the way and the reason why we believe that the social sentiment is very important to track these days is really indeed because people are traveling where they can go, but also traveling where they want to go. And basically they will continue to pick up the destination they really trust among those destinations they are allowed to go. So the way that we measure sentiment and social sentiment at TCI is by aggregating all these mass of social posts, articles, reports, which are shared by not only officials, but also brands or citizens or companies, consumers. Everything is aggregated, classified, and polarized. And from that, we try to understand which are the destinations on the rise, and maybe which are the main driving factors of the sentiment that can give a bit of clues for destinations to know how they could amplify the demand for their own destination. So really, again, sentiment and e-reputation is never predictive alone of bookings, but it can help, because if you are on the top of the list in terms of wish and in terms of favorability and e-reputation, you have more chance to be visited in the near future. So I will start with sharing one of the main KPI, which is the net sentiment score. This score is actually measuring the polarity of social conversations from all social channels. So it aggregates the top 20 most popular regional destinations consolidated. And we look at comparing and benchmarking how Asia Pacific is somehow performing against other regions. And as you can see, we've been doing this for years, but we are particularly looking at what's going on from the beginning of the crisis. And as you see, first of all, most of the regions have been partly recovered their brand reputation equity since the beginning of the crisis, and definitely Asia Pacific is also somehow enjoying some recovery in this area. And as we speak, looking at the latest update for August, it seems that like Asia Pacific is a bit of, in the middle of the competitive space. The score is positive. It's about 30 points net score. It's true to say that before our European summer, so somewhere in May, the whole region has been somehow hit by some negative stories around COVID, of course, also a bit around the political aspects and facets in the region, but it has been restored so far quite quickly. And today, whereas it widely exceeds the score for Americas, North America, South America, which is still suffering a bit from a negative sentiment, it's true to say as well that Europe is probably the toughest challenger for Asia Pacific today in terms of EE reputation. So Europe, Middle East, Africa, particularly Europe. And we have actually some other database evidences from other global consumer surveys that tend to show that Europe is really tough in terms of appeal for a next trip abroad from many parts of the world and several markets. And the other learning from these trends, and particularly the latest trends, is to confirm that Asia has a very, very strong and super positive reputation in Asia, with a net score of 43%, a bit better than in Europe, and probably in North America, it will take a bit of time before Asia completely recover the pre-COVID sentiment level that they used to have in the past. So it definitely tends to confirm that the pent-up demand for traveling in Asia from Asia is going to boom as soon as possibilities will be there, maybe sooner than from other parts of the world. Looking at some individual performances, we have a group of, it's only, of course, a selection of destinations there, because Asia Pacific has so many beautiful destinations. But looking at some of the performers there, we have an interesting group of countries on the left, which really somehow enjoy some sort of competitive advantages compared to the others. We find again many of those brands which already were mentioned in the past forecast sessions. Some of them are really on the rise, like Cambodia, for example, pushed by many factors. One of it being the eco-friendly B&B growing conversations over there. Thailand, and it's good for the headquarters of Pata and people there, is also enjoying quite a nice reputation, which has been pushed recently, for example, by this workation, or the best ranked workation places in the world. Other destinations are kind of preserved in their equity throughout the crisis. Japan, for example, has been also on the rise recently, thanks to, or partly thanks to, the Olympic Games. Other destinations like Hong Kong have been enjoying recently great conversations about food and event-driven tourism coming back in the country. On the contrary, there is a group of destinations which are still a bit more exposed in social conversations. They are still very positive, but a bit more of negativity over there. There could be some examples, like in Turkey, the wildfires developing during summer was, of course, not good for the reputation of the country, also because it resonates with the global sustainable and climate change agenda. Now, looking at briefly what is driving the reputation of Asia on the positive, and a few aspects of vigilance points on the negative. And it's always very interesting to understand what's pushing high positivity, because it gives a lot of clues for amplifying the organic positive sentiment about travel and tourism and destinations in the region. And again, this time we have a great mix of combined drivers, confirming that there are many positive conversations about the nature, the wildlife observations. Adventurous, particularly outdoor adventurous, is pushing a lot of positivity across Asia. I think the UNESCO is also a brand which is helping a lot of destinations to be put on the map for potential visitors. many, maybe a bit too much of a ranking and top and awarded and best attractions, destinations for particular topics. That is, giving a chance to some less popular destinations to be portrayed as potential great places to visit, including best islands, including great experiences of snow mountains in national parks across the regions. We also see a lot of very positive comments, a lot of attractions from social conversations about all the things related to taking time, engaging into road trips by car, camp vans, slow train journeys, for example, another alternative way to visit Thailand. So we know from consumer prospect that there's a very high appetite for taking time and taking the best for the next trip abroad. And so the concept of road trip is really gaining a lot of interest. And Asia basically is a great region to serve that demands. Workation, of course, is on the rise as a key driver of positive sentiment. There's been also lots of new initiatives in relation to keeping the link, even if some borders are closed. Still, you can have a chance to live or to learn, for example, local dance performances from home through virtual technology, and many aspects related to food and gastronomy. Along with outdoor and nature, we really have confirmation that those destinations able to profile their brand on gastronomy, on foodies segment are going to attract more in the future. It's a very growing segment, which is fueling a lot of positive sentiment. In terms of vigilance points, I would say nothing new there. Most of social negative conversations come from, of course, either COVID with borders opening, closing, really, lack of clarity. There some threats about the new variants and so on. And also in Asia Pacific, just like in any other regions, the geopolitical agenda is sometimes kind of polluting a bit the positivity of the region. So you will see in the report, I'm not going to comment on all of them, some examples of social posts or tweets or sentiment shared by people about some destinations. Just to give illustrative example of that. So I will leave you with a few key learning. First of all, today, the very latest trends we see in September tends to show that Asia Pacific seems to be a bit on the rise, but there is an extreme volatility of this indicator. But so far, so good. Asia is in the middle of the competitive space, relatively okay in terms of reputation today, particularly really in Asia. We feel that pent-up demand very strongly expressed through the sentiment and the reputation. However, the world is rising, and most probably the key competitor for Asia today in terms of projecting the sentiment and reputation is Europe, really by far. Then we see all these positive prospects about specific niche tourism or passion-based tourism that includes outdoor adventure, food, trains, for whatever reason, is getting a lot of attention and positive conversations, driving positivity across the region. And as always, the few negativity aspects is mostly fueled by COVID-related aspects, particularly whereas vaccination is driving a lot of positivity. We see a lot of lack of clarity about what is open, what's not, which is kind of driving concerns about or among potential consumers for planning, and along with other classic social, societal, or political aspects. So let's see what the future will be, and happy to take your question after if we have time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Olivier. And as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the Q&A. He'll be joining us later on for a panel discussion and Q&A. So send your questions in now, and we're really happy to get to them later on in today's webinar. So we've heard a bit of sentiment analysis, and now we're actually going to look at some actual data from both the hospitality side and the air side. I think next is the Vice President of Strategic Clients and Partnerships at APAC at Forward Keys. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jameson Wong, who's going to give us some actual data about what's happening in the aviation sector. So with that, Jameson, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Let me turn on my screen. All good. See the screen?
Yeah, I don't see you though.
Yeah, 1 second, frozen. Sorry. See me now? No, you still don't see me now, I guess.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Paul, for the introduction. Very happy to be back with the PATA visitor forecast update once again. I think 3 months, 4 months in. I wish today's presentation would bring more positive news, but unfortunately, reporting on the facts as is. Yeah, let's go through the numbers. But before that, let me just do a few words about Forward Keys and the data we'll be using in this presentation. Forward Keys is essentially a B2B travel intelligence company specializing in global air travel. We use big data to help our customers understand travel demands and trends in real time. If you'd like to know more, please visit our website. Okay. In today's presentation, we'll also be predominantly using issued air tickets. That basically means factual air tickets sold to look into current and the future state of travel. Now let us start off with a little bit of a global overview. Okay, so global summer performance between 1st of May all the way through to the 31st of August 2021 versus pre-pandemic, so 2019. Okay, so running through these fairly quickly, if we look at the Americas, the performance has largely been lifted by Caribbean and the Central American region thanks to relatively loose travel restrictions and also good vaccination rate in the US, which is their main source market. For summer in Europe, we observed a lot of intra-regional travel, especially towards the southern region for holidays. For the Africa and Middle East region, we saw a large portion of these travelers has actually been what we call VFRs, so visiting friends and relatives. Now, most destinations in APAC remains closed, so no surprises, we are minus 94% year-over-year pre-pandemic. Now, if you look at it from a timeline perspective, and let me just bring on my laser pointer to guide you guys through a little bit. Okay, so a couple of things to watch out for. First of all, this blue line over here is essentially representing the America region. Fairly stable, whereas what we see, this orange line, this slight uptrend representing Europe, it's essentially a noticeable uptrend that's picking up from mid-June when schools end and most of the Europeans, including my colleagues, start taking their holidays. So that's this uptick over here. And the yellow line that's representing Africa and Middle East, this dip over here is actually reflecting the typical July high safari season, which obviously it's not open right now. Okay, so that's for this slide. Now, if we kind of take a closer look into the Asia Pacific region, and I'll spend a little bit more time on this slide. So Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia, well, and the rest of the region, we pretty much remain closed for international arrivals. Specifically for the Northeast Asia region, the only winner really is at this point Macau, which opened for travelers from mainland China. Yep. For Southeast Asia, we are still looking at record numbers on a daily basis in Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore right now. So yeah, we are not expecting to be opening up feverishly anytime soon. However, we do start to see certain steps in the right direction. For example, we note that Japan has began issuing digital COVID-19 vaccination certificates, or rather, they will be issuing these certificates in December. Right now, it's only pretty much a paper form. And the good thing is that as of right now, 34 countries and regions have recognized these vaccine passport. The documents, however, and also obviously do not exempt these travelers from quarantine measures if they do arrive/return. Singapore announced a plan to live with COVID and gradually reopen its borders. How fast, how successful? Let's see, we still don't know yet. In the South Asia region, most of the countries in the South Asian region has been benefiting a lot from VFR travel. Now, again, specific to the South Asian region, we have a clear winner. In this case, it's the Maldives, who at the start of the year were very, very strong in communicating their interest in welcoming back travelers. In fact, Maldives is pretty much the top performing international leisure destination in APAC right now. Okay. Further down south in the Pacific, well, New Zealand's borders to remain closed for the rest of the year, and they plan to cautiously reopen its borders to international travelers early next year. We've seen news from 2 weeks ago that Australia announced plans to launch a digital pass for vaccinated travelers, so that's a great step in the right direction. Followed by a separate news whereby Qantas announced that they are releasing international capacity in December. So two fairly independent reports of positive news. So that's great. So that's a global overview of what's been happening over the past 4 months in our region. Now let's kind of look at what's happening, what's open in APAC, and pretty much the only thing that's open right now is domestic travel. Yep, even with its own challenges, it is still pretty much the only form of travel that is possible right now. No surprises over here. China, our largest domestic market, is performing right at the top of the charts at 92%, or rather 92% year-over-year pre-pandemic. However, we do also have to recognize that in some periods there are fresh outbreaks, contrasting, the extremely positive periods whereby domestic travel in China has actually surpassed 2019's level. Okay. Yeah, we also see for South Korea, most of these domestic traffic is actually directed towards Jeju and Seoul. One of the big changes in a way has to be Vietnam. Vietnam was doing very, very well at the start of the year. In fact, it was one of the best performing domestic markets in the region. However, new restrictions aimed at curbing an outbreak has seen its domestic travel hitting some snares. Okay. Now, if we look at China domestic travel from a chronological order, we do have to acknowledge that there has been, an outbreak at the start of the year and an outbreak, what was it, last month in August? Yes, that's correct. However, we do note that, and we do expect that for this time around, the outbreak in August in Nanjing, that domestic travel in China will rebound fairly quickly once the outbreak has been brought under control, much like the performance that we have seen at the start of the year. Okay. Now, done with domestic travel in APAC, let's look at international travel in APAC. Pretty much the only open markets for international leisure travel at the moment is Maldives and the French Polynesia. Yeah, every other country much more restrictive. I don't need to. It's not breaking news. Okay. For Macau, I mentioned earlier on, after relaxing rules for travelers from mainland China, Macau saw an increase in passenger arrivals. New Zealand, New Zealand established travel bubbles with Australia and Cook Island. However, both bubbles are suspended right now. Speaking about bubbles, that has been the theme of the year with our numerous attempts at establishing travel bubbles. So what we see here is the Pacific travel bubbles for Australia, New Zealand, and New Zealand Cook Islands. It was good while it lasted, right? Yeah, I'm not gonna go into details on what the trends tell you, but it's pretty clear it was good while it lasted. If we look at the Hong Kong Singapore bubble, same thing. First time announcement was great. We see great response from the community. We saw a 3x, increase in tickets being issued week following the announcement. That got called off. The second announcement, okay, 2x, 1x, yeah. And then the third announcement, it's like, yeah, let me know when it's happening, okay? So bubbles. And then we saw the introduction of the sandbox protocol, specifically for Phuket. It was great. We saw a jump in interest in terms of tickets being booked from the European market wanting to go to Phuket. But also, I need to draw your attention that to the fact that the interest was not sustainable for various reasons, including the outbreak in Bangkok that got kind of clumped together with Thailand, right? As your news media would conveniently put it together. So we have this situation in with the Phuket Sandbox. And then we have this situation with the Singapore, Germany vaccinated travel lane. I look at this as we are trying the I'm ready whenever you are method of opening up unilaterally. Of course, there was an increase in demand for travel between Singapore and Germany. Frankly, more so for Singaporeans wanting to travel to Germany than for Germans wanting to come to Singapore. And it remains to be seen whether this demand can be sustained. Okay, I hope it does, but I don't have my hopes up, to be frank with you. So that's the various protocols that we have seen: bubbles, sandbox. I'm ready. I'm ready whenever you are unilaterally opening up. Now let's look at the outlook for the next 6 months. Okay. I wish I can channel some of Professor Song's optimism, looking 3 years ahead, but looking 6 months ahead right now, we can expect minimal to happen in the Asia Pacific region over the next 6 months. As of right now, bookings are pretty much at 8% of pre-pandemic levels. Okay, whereas the rest of the world is faring noticeably better. And if we look at the time series for the next 6 months in terms of APAC inbound and APAC outbound travel, yeah, I mean, we are essentially at hovering between 4 and 8% of pre-pandemic levels. And to bring in some perspective into this particular spike in Q1 of 2022, telling us that we are at 18% of pre-pandemic levels. I do need to remind everyone that we are basically comparing with March 2020, which is right at the start of the pandemic. So we are essentially at 18% of pandemic levels. So yeah, it doesn't bode well. So in summary, what are some of the takeaways and all points to ponder over? Well, the region is the least performing. We are still closed over summer, over the next 6 months. No surprises over here. The travel bubbles worked until they did not, right? Which is for me a concern. I mean, as a as a business in the market, as a traveler myself, it's hard to plan when there is no consistency or reliability. I just can't plan, 3 months in advance anymore. And that is really hurting us. That is really shaping the way we will travel for the next 2 years, for example. And we've also seen, I mean, sustained demand for international travel. We have a lot of people, myself included, in the early parts of the year saying, yeah, demand is there. But now I'm no longer sure. So can we sustain demand for international travel? I don't know, but for sure it's not a given. And the last one is really kind of a point for all of us, here to ponder over. With low certainty travel policies impacting the way we travel, what else besides bubbles, besides sandbox, that we need to see being implemented that would give us the confidence, the reliability, the consistency to travel as we did before, right? And I guess for all of us business operators here, what do we need that would give us that visibility to plan whether or not we are still going to be in business, in 3-6 months' time. So I'll leave you with this. If you guys did the presentation, drop us a note. We'll be happy to share it with you. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jameson. Fantastic presentation as always. I love the humor spread out a little bit, sprinkled in there. But any questions for Jameson, feel free to drop in the Q&A. He'll be with us after one more presentation. So with that, Jameson, thank you so much. And so we've got a glimpse of the aviation sector. And now let's take a look at the hospitality sector. And with that, we have the Business Development Manager for Southeast Asia at STR. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Fenedy Uriat. Can you pronounce
Fenedy. Just call me Fenedy.
Fenedy. So
Yes.
my apologies. Still tongue-tied today. All right, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting STR. I'm happy to be back again in another session with PATA. In terms of sharing, what we have forecasted for the region and also some key destinations, in the world. Now, for my session, I'm going to be talking a lot about supply, demand, a little bit of profitability. Of course, there will be some eye-opening questions and, of course, the forecast that we have. I'm going to share my screen.
Looks good.
Can you okay, it's all good? Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with SDR, just gonna give you a little bit of overview. So SDR, what we do is we provide hospitality data. So if you're looking at the hospitality sphere, we are the leading provider of that. And we are also part of the big commercial real estate provider of data as well, which is CoStar. So we come into one big globe of data, insights, for analysis and forecast, etc. Now, for SDR, just to start first with the different KPIs and also what we do and what we provide to our partners. Of course, if you're in the hospitality industry, you are looking at the obvious KPI occupancy, average daily rate, revenue per available room. We also look at supply and demand, which is availability of the rooms and how many rooms are sold. And then we can drill down into profitability or P&L and even up to the forecast report. So of course, you're going to get some snippets of what we can foresee in the next few years for some key destinations. All right, so my agenda for this afternoon is really to not only just to share the data, but also to share you some probing questions. So again, there will be a lot of stories about supply shift, demand dynamics, and also forecast. It really ties hand in hand with the earlier presentation from Jameson, from Olivier, where the sentiments are coming. And of course, I mean, these are just key questions. With all those that happened with COVID, this is a difficult question to ask. Like, how many hotels will actually reopen? We have seen many hotels that closed or temporarily closed or even permanently closed. So that's a reality if the demand dynamic does not continue or to supply, the business to our industry. So moving forward, will there be, will we be looking more into the leisure, drive-by destinations, the trains, as mentioned by Olivier earlier, or we're just going to be like in the next few months or year, are we still doing this business meetings like Zoom? Of course, we look forward to having this an actual presentation with you in person. And of course, for the forecast is, are we going to be conservative? Are we going to panic? Or, we just wait and, be optimistic about it. But of course, for forecasting, there's so many mechanics and drivers that needs to be considered. So this is just hopefully the key takeaway, when I finish the presentation. So let's talk about this basic supply and demand dynamics. So here is a representation of our data that has from the hotels that closed or temporarily closed from January all the way to July of this year. So the supply, as we can see, is very, very fluid. They're going to open, they're going to be closed. But let's just look at Europe here. Europe, in fact, is one of the most closed region if we would look at it from January perspective. But towards July, there's that big shift in terms of a lot of hotels that has opened. And Olivier has mentioned, Europe is a big competitor in terms of destination. And even last night, or maybe yesterday, I read somewhere that US is now going to open that travel with Europe. They close and then now they're going to open. Then obviously that is going to be a big demand driver for the region. If we would look at the Southeast Asian region, kind of, still a lot of supply that are still in temporary closure. So still from January all the way to July, we're not really opening as much as there is in Northeastern Asia. Now, occupancy obviously is a big driver. So this is just a representation of about 18 months performance on 28 days occupancies. So China obviously is leading at one point, but they had that issue about the Nanjing cases in July, so that obviously affected. Just below before was Europe enjoying a much higher occupancy, but now it's going up again towards the summer season. That line in the middle kind of tells us where do we need to be, because we are comparing from 2019 levels. We can't compare to 2020. That's kind of the period that we want to forget. Even if you're in Maldives, we have seen that the Maldives has closed for a couple of months during 2020. But no, that's another story that later I will share on to you. And this is just a high level in terms of different regions' performances in terms of occupancy. Now, I've mentioned about China and China having opened, and then when we compare the different Asia Pacific markets or countries, this is interesting. The top 5 markets in occupancy, if we would compare from 2019 and this year, from August, it's really like taken by China. That's Sanya, highest, one of the highest, Shanghai, Beijing. Hong Kong is there, that's 6, but also interesting with Jakarta, because Indonesia never really had that full closure or lockdown as compared to maybe Vietnam or Philippines, for example. So there's still that business element happening, and Jakarta surprisingly sit in the top 5 markets in terms of occupancy growth, comparing from 2019 and 2021 levels. But looking at this at this perspective. Now, China, let's go back to China a little bit. So this is a 2019, 2020, and then half of the year performance, just really to show you how things are so fluid when there are cases. Vietnam was mentioned earlier, and we know that if you are sitting in Vietnam, enjoying the great performances, managing of the cases up to about early this year, and then suddenly, boom, there is a case. Similarly with China, July 20 was kind of that time whereby the Nanjing case was first spotted, and that's why we have seen in China that's a huge drop in terms of occupancy, that 32% drop in occupancy level. Of course, that's going to project again going an upward trend because they have managed the cases as well. Now, when we compare the different classes, it's just also good to understand when we're looking at data, not just from an overall country perspective, we're also trying to understand, which of the bucket, if you are on the higher tier, luxury, or down to the lower tier, which one is really gaining traction. What we have seen from our data for China is that the luxury class has surpassed the 2019 level. So that is a great indicator for the higher tier to be in a much better position than that of the other classes. This is for China alone. Now, it was mentioned earlier about Hong Kong. So our latest data for Hong Kong up to about mid of August is certainly a good start for or a great number because based on this number, we've seen that steady rise in occupancy. For the first time, we have seen that the occupancy reach up to 60%. So I mean, those hotel rooms were actually filled up. And that is similar to the same point of 2019 of November for for Hong Kong market. So that is some good news somehow, because at least there's some good trajectory, even if it's not a full upswing, but that slow, steady rise for the Hong Kong occupancy level. Now let's go to South Asia, so India and the Maldives. We know that a couple of months that India has gripped with, terror and all these, stories about the numerous cases, and we know that it was chaotic, But interestingly, the country were able to swing and change. Were able to manage somehow the case, and the question is how much of the confidence has come back when it comes to the India performance. So this is on the luxury and upper upscale class. So you're looking at the upper tier classes based on our July data. Goa from June and July was literally up. And we've seen that jump in terms of performance. And this is still a very local or domestic driven market. So that is very, very interesting. And look at this for Rajasthan. It surpassed 2019 levels. So just about 2 or 3 months, they were able to swing back again in terms of demand performance. You really see that the luxury and upper upscale, there were more travels in that sector. So these are some interesting recoveries that we have seen for the Indian market. And of course, weekend spikes. We wanted to understand based on these different classes, what is it just during only for the weekdays? But we have seen that across different classes, whether you're from luxury even to the lower class, mid-scale and economy, there has been some uptick during the weekend. So that there is a pattern there that, this is kind of a good indicator for the Indian market in terms of trying to segment weekdays and also the weekend. And Maldives, one of the most open market, they really they really have positioned themselves as open. You can, as long as you're vaccinated, or you can have even your vaccination there. But basically, Maldives has been open. And we know that even, I guess, if you would recall from the past presentation, that Maldives has really had an upswing in terms of performance. So yes, there's that gap of July, there was like a gap, and that means the market or the area is closed. But then towards October, November, December, they were there in terms of occupancy. First quarter also, good performance. But again, there's that slide in terms of performance towards May, June, and July. One of the main reason also is their source market. Of course, source market is very important. One of their source markets is also the affluent Indians, but they also have a huge Russian market that goes to the Maldives. So again, we saw that slide for Maldives, but interestingly, we really wanted to know, what's this going to be for fourth quarter for Maldives. So we do have some data on our forward-looking data, and it looks it's going to be sunny. I would say it's still sunny in terms of occupancy on the books. Why? Because this performance, this trend line shows that there's about above 50% occupancy on the books already by October. And by December, they have already booked around 40% in total for the market. So there is certainly a good base. If you are from revenue management, then obviously it's always that looking at the different base, how much we have in the base, then they can start to yield already and play around with the rates. But nonetheless, it's a good indicator that even towards December, end of the year, is that Maldives were able to push in a good occupancy bookings for them. Now let's go to Australia and New Zealand. So I'm just going to touch on a little bit on the Pacific. Of course, as we know, it's very well managed. Of course, Melbourne, for example, would have a lot of lockdowns, but even with the small number, they will close, they will do some lockdowns, etc. But generally, what we have seen is that for Australia and New Zealand market, there's really much recovery that has seen and closer to the 2019 levels. One of the key things that is interesting is that Gold Coast is really also pushing towards 100%, meaning they're reaching to that point of going towards the 2019 levels. And this is a performance of the occupancy levels from January of 2020 all the way to about August. So there's an ups and downs, of course, for Australia and New Zealand. Australia has that slump in July and August because there are cases. New Zealand also has got some cases, and of course, we have seen that in a closer look towards August, about second or third week of August, we saw that slide in terms of occupancy for New Zealand market. Now, of course, very much because, like I said, they're very strict. Any small or new cases, they will do the lockdown, and this is just in the news. So there's kind of a burst bubble in terms of New Zealand, in terms of travel because of the bite of the Delta outbreaks. So this is, we try to understand the performances of the market when there has been a lockdown. Is it going to be a V-shaped recovery, or does it take time for them to be able to recover? So this is just going to show you how it is into Melbourne, Adelaide, Sydney, Perth, and Canberra. So the green line below, that's really for the Sydney market. Once there was a case that was announced, it took about still 50 days, still kind of takes a long time for them to be able to recover in terms of occupancy. But let's look at the red. In Perth, there was a case, and then just about 20 days, there's already an upswing. So there are different sub-markets or markets in Australia have different performances. So this is kind of their reaction whenever there's a lockdown that has been announced. And looking at the what's on the books, again, it's always good to see what's on the books. So I'm just going to share to you on Gold Coast, based on occupancy levels. Of course, during Christmas holiday, very, very high, business on the books, 40%. Similarly with the school holiday. So people are anticipating, and it's already booked in advance. So this really tells us that whenever there is an event or, holidays, etc., it will still push the demand in the market, especially in Australia when it's still, there's confidence into staying in a hotel. But of course, there's still that uncertainty because we don't really know when there's another wave that will hit. But nonetheless, based on the books, this is what we have, and a good base on two points, which is on the school holiday towards October, and also Christmas holiday for Gold Coast. Now let's go to Southeast Asia. So this is just a general trend from July all the way to August. So Singapore still sits on that higher occupancy. We know that there's a support from the government many, and of course, for those SHN hotels or stay home notice, they can stay in the hotel. So that kind of also push the occupancy levels for the Singapore market. But there's still also a demand coming from the locals staying in the hotel. So there are staycation hotels. Of course, we are looking at just a total country. In the Philippines, repatriation is still the name of the game for the demand, pushing the occupancy levels. Interestingly, their occupancy is around 60, close to occupancy levels of 2019 levels. Now, what is interesting for the Philippines is that, like I said, it's about repatriation. So when there's a huge effort from the government to repatriate, there's like a private jet or private plane for repatriated Filipinos. Then, of course, they go to and stay in the hotel. So that really pushed up the occupancy levels for the key markets, especially Metro Manila in general. Now, of course, there's still Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. That sits in the lower bucket in terms of occupancy levels. So Indonesia, just a little bit of upswing because, like I said, they never really closed. So it's still kind of a business as usual for them. Now, let's just, just to give you some perspective of the 5 bottom performing markets, right? So again, earlier I showed you the top performing markets really taken by, majority from China and then one of Jakarta. But here for occupancy, the bottom performers were, you got Phuket, you got Bali. Of course, we know that they're really like on a challenge phase because of growth, because we are comparing to 2019 levels. Pre-pandemic, they were at the heydays of best demand there is. So of course, Melbourne there also sits at the bottom, mainly because they're also been beaten with some lockdowns and, being a city, they also were enjoying a good growth number in 2019 levels. Now let's go a little bit to Indonesia. I'm just going to touch on some historical performance for Indonesia. Jakarta, interestingly, has for this year is better performing against 2020. So that's good. So that's a good indicator for the Jakarta market. Like I said, they are in business as usual. Now, on the other side of the polarity would be Bali. Huge difference as compared to 2019 levels. So you would see that, this is kind of, the effect and how much Bali is affected in terms of occupancy. So you can see it's about below 10 and below % in occupancy. But then there's still some business happening. Governments are still holding their meetings in Bali. So that's kind of their reliance on business as compared to international tourism. Now let's go to Thailand. So just to give you some snippet of, the rate, how is the rate movement in Thailand market? So for basically, it's still very working along 2,500 baht. There's some uptick on some certain dates, of course, but still a lot of restriction, the demand, the cost, and it's still closed. And hopefully with Bangkok, if Bangkok will reopen, I mean, you see probably that in the news that Bangkok might open 15 or the 1st of October, but unless there is like 70% vaccination for the locals. But that will potentially open the source market. But for now, this is kind of the rates that we have seen as a trend line for Thailand market. So let's talk about the Phuket sandbox. I mean, everybody's really looking at the sandbox. It becomes like, a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are looking at the performance. But of course, performance is another thing. So let's look at how it affected the occupancy. Yes, from the time of it was introduced, we've seen an uptick, a little bit of uptick for occupancy. Imagine they were from about 10% occupancy, and then there's that push about 20% in general for Phuket. The rates generally very stagnant, still around 2,500 baht. A little bit of movement there for the RevPAR, that's the line below in purple, but of course you know that RevPAR is affected by both movement of occupancy and ADR. So it was the occupancy that kind of pushed that RevPAR levels, but again, still very low in terms of the RevPAR levels for Phuket market. Now, the question is, where, with all this, travelers going to, vaccinated travelers going to Phuket, where do they actually stay? So we try to look at the area where they're actually moving. So for the Northwest, the occupancy that we have clocked in is around 18%. This is the clear winner, Laguna and Surin Kamala. They have, we're able to get about 27% in terms of occupancy. Central East, 12%, 18% in Patong, and the least would be the Caron and the Nai Harm. So with the question that, the sandbox will open to other destination, of course, with so little or high demand, I don't know how many have actually booked, but there will be a distribution of demand, obviously, and that will definitely affect also the Phuket market once we looked at that data. But when I look at the September data from 1 to 15, so just to give you some side note of what's happening on the other side of Thailand, Hua Hin was very, very much well performing because they were a drive-by destination 2-3 hours away from Bangkok. But then there was that closure or lockdown that happened in July. So that's why we saw a drop of performance. But surprisingly, for September, on some weekends, we've seen some good performance up to about 40 to 60% there in September. Now, for Pattaya, we've seen that occupancy has already moved up from 15 and then slowly climbed up to about 30% by mid-September. Chiang Mai, I highlighted in red, still remains very challenging because it's still a single-digit occupancy. So very, very challenged there for the north of Thailand in terms of occupancy levels. Now, let's touch on a little bit of Bangkok. Nothing much has happened. Everybody now, if we were anticipating for that sandbox for Phuket, now people are waiting for that story of, okay, how are they going to do it for Bangkok opening, whether it's 1st of October or 15th. We just have to tune in into the news and see what would have been the potential demand driver for Bangkok for October. But looking at July and all the way to August data, interestingly, for the first time in our data, the Bangkok surrounding were able to push up in terms of occupancy and overtook, Silom, the central part, Sukhumvit, for the first time. So it could be those people who are looking for maybe a little bit of travel or staycation. That's what we have seen, because for Bangkok surrounding, this is kind of first time that we have seen whereby Bangkok surrounding was really performing much better than the other submarkets. And of course, looking at what's up ahead for Bangkok, if you remember Jameson's note about what's on the books, it would probably be similar for Bangkok because it's very, very soft. September, yes, we've seen some, base of about 15 towards 20% about this week, but then towards October, below 10%, and then it's still very soft in terms of booking. So we don't really see that, people are booking in advance. Maybe people are just waiting for that, news that Bangkok will open, for example, and that we'll have to wait and see. If there's the news, if that is confirmed, then we'll probably find some uptick in terms of occupancy in the books. But for now, we don't see anything, and this report was just pulled just last week. Now, let's look at some profitability perspectives. Now, with STR, we're not just looking at your usual KPIs or occupancy, ADR, or RevPAR. We also need to look into the profitability. Are the hotels actually, performing? So you look at GoPAR, you look at the expenses, you look at the revenues, and all this really comes into play. So for just to give you some snippet of information for profitability, so we try to compare the monthly profitability data that we have collected for these key markets, Bali, Bangkok, Beijing, all the way to Sydney. Just to highlight on Bali, so there's a drop in February, still very low demand. So they really sit in that lower tier, as you would say, because Bali is really not performing quite well. However, for Bangkok, we saw that, in terms of GOP, there was a slide in May, but, they're trying to inch up a little bit, but still very far from 2019 levels. That line shows for 2019 levels. For Singapore, slightly above that line. So still month on month, we're able to kind of look at their profitability levels for all these markets. Now let's look at forecast. With SDR, like I said, it's not just PNL, but we also do forecast. We miss one of our key presenter this afternoon from Euromonitor, and we really look forward to hearing her information. But at least let me show you a little bit of what we share in the forecast. There are certainly, before I go and deep dive into the numbers, just to give you that there are certain demand drivers that we consider when we do the forecast. SDR pairs up with tourism economics, and every quarter we come up with a report, a quarterly forecast for key markets. We can customize, obviously, but these are the drivers that we have to consider, like the city GDP. We look at occupancy, we look at demand, the usual KPI for the hotels. But we also need to look at the country GDP. We look at the company profits, unemployment, exchange rate is something of key importance to also consider, and also the elasticity of the ADR. So those are many things that we consider, including those restrictions. So our team are always on the lookout for any news and factor that into the model when we do the quarterly forecast. So just a comparison of some key markets based on the demand. So of course that line shows us an index of 2019. So the key question is, for, let's say, for Bangkok, how far are you, or are, based on that we have projected, how far is Bangkok to the 2019 levels? And what we have seen is they're really going to achieve that level of demand around 2024 only, and just go beyond towards 2025. So still very, it would be a long journey for the Bangkok market. Similarly, Tokyo will probably be a little bit earlier in terms of demand, pushing to 2019 levels. And of course, we got that winner from Shanghai, which is we're projecting towards next year. So these are just some important, information based on the demand that we can see. For example, it's not highlighted here, but for Singapore, again, we are looking at occupancy that, it might, for the annual rate of growth, we're looking around 39.3%. So ADR is expected to expand with an average of 2.4 on an annual rate. So this just a snippet for the Singapore market. All right, so I hope with this a little bit of demand forecast, this, of course, the model will still change. There will be like a November forecast. We will take in consideration new factors to consider, like many markets are going to open, so that will come into play as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of what some key markets are going to perform in the next few years. All right, so all right, so is there any question? I mean, I'm happy to answer alongside with the other speakers who will answer other questions that you might have later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fenady. We're actually way over time here, so there's no questions. So we're going to skip the panel and Q&A. But as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. So as we wrap up here, I'd like to now just welcome PATA CEO Liz Ortiguera to say a few closing remarks. Liz, over to you.
First of all, a big note of thanks to Professor Song, Olivier, Jameson, and Fenedy. The insights that you provided today are really valuable, particularly for many of our corporates and organizations who are in the midst of their planning process for next year. What I would add is that, while some of these, macro trends are sobering and they are a watch out for us, we are aware of a number of innovative pilots happening across the region. Vaccination rates are rising. There are pilots happening to open up and safely secure secondary, tertiary destinations. So I do think that there will be bright spots that start to emerge. I know that, I've been told several times from people around the region that they're avidly also watching what's happening here in Singapore with the VTLs opening up and the fact that we've hit 82% vaccination rate. And I think that, let me assure you that, as PATA, we're here to support you with increased insights and workshops and support in terms of business development, innovation. Normally these forecasts are done annually, but given the volatility and the dynamic nature of our situation right now, we wanted to bring you more frequent insights from our vast network of industry experts. And so we'll continue to do that in various forms. And please know we're here to support you and the industry recovery. And the new world will look different from previously. And so, but I do think that there are silver linings to the challenges that we're going through right now, and we're here to help you navigate them. So thank you to our research partners for giving these insights. And I think, we had scheduled a Q&A session. I think we would probably go another hour more if we started a Q&A now, but unfortunately we'll have to end right now. But look forward to our next session. We will be bringing you frequent sessions to give you support through this industry recovery. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Liz. And once again, thank you to all our speakers. As Liz has mentioned, this was very comprehensive. I mean, you have really got a full look of the whole tourism landscape, from aviation to forecast, sentiments, and of course, hospitality. So once again, thank you to all of our speakers. Now let's do a quick wrap up here before we end this webinar proper. So as I said, thank you to all of our speakers. And, unfortunately, Caroline couldn't be here from your monitor, but hopefully she'll be able to join us on our next forecast update, and that will be in January of next year. So if you enjoyed this, I just want to make you aware of a couple events that we have coming up this weekend. Oh, sorry. As Professor Song had mentioned, as I also mentioned as well, our visitor forecast update, so the third quarter update, will be released in the next week or so. So please do keep an eye out for that. So it will be available on our website, www.pata.org. Just look under PATA catalog, and there you'll find all of our reports, not just this one, not just the updates, but all of our reports that we've released over the past few years. So just want to make you aware of that. As I said, this is a couple upcoming events that we want to make you aware of. This is our Virtual Rural Tourism and Sustainable Development Conference 2021. This is on Saturday, September 25th from 3 to 6 p.m. And that is Beijing time, so that's GMT +8. We have a great lineup of speakers, so do join us this Saturday. In October, we have our virtual PATA Wellness and Luxury Travel Conference and Mart 2021. It's October 20th to 22nd. It's a one-day conference and one-day B2B trade show. So if you're in the wellness or luxury space, feel free to register today. You can register as a buyer, seller, conference delegate, or visitor. We have a great program. We're really working on getting some great speakers for it. So please do sign up today. More information is available on our website, and you can see it right here, www.pata.org. If you have any questions for our speakers, like I said, unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we didn't have a chance to do Q&A and discussions. If you have any questions for them, feel free to send them to me. I'll be happy to pass them along. I should mention this, any of the presentations, we'll be making some presentations available for our attendees. So if you want a presentation, feel free to email me at my email address as well. And with that, lastly, thank you once again to all of our speakers for really a fantastic webinar. are very comprehensive. We got a good view of what's going on, just in the next 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. Hopefully that will be assistance to all of our members joining us today. Thank you as always to Liz for those closing remarks. Thank you as always to our members, partners, life members, and chapter members for your continued support for the association. And lastly, and most importantly, thank you for all of you for joining us this afternoon. And I will see you on Saturday at our virtual rural tour, rural event on September 25th. So take care, be safe, and see you next time. Bye.